Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome President and CEO of the Incourage Community Foundation, Kelly Ryan.
Good afternoon. I'm going to take the conversation down to practitioner and community level. But first I would like to say congratulations to the Rockefeller Foundation and thank you for inviting us to tell our story and our big bet as part of your centennial celebration. So on behalf of the 45,000 residents that live in central Wisconsin, Southwood County as we call it, I'd like to share with you just a little bit about our community, our history. We live in an area that's rich with natural resources. Water and timber fueled the growth of our local economy for over a century, and we're the largest production area of cranberries in the world, and paper, pictured here, is the region's dominant industry. Life was good in Southwood County for many years. We were proud to say that we were the smallest city to be headquarters to a Fortune 500 company in the United States. But economic security and life as we knew it changed in the year 2000 when Consolidated Papers was sold to a multinational firm and the headquarters moved to Finland. Overnight, a leadership vacuum was created, and by 2005, we had lost 40% of our total employment, or 5,000 manufacturing jobs. The problem and cry we heard repeatedly was jobs, that we need more jobs. It's the same call that we hear today in Wisconsin and across the nation. But was the problem really jobs? We began to understand that our real work was not job creation. In fact, lack of jobs was a symptom of a larger issue that needed to be addressed to foster any kind of sustainable change, and that was community culture. Though there were many benefits to having a stable industry build an economy over a century, the unintended consequences were insidious and deeply entrenched. A dependent, paternal, entitled, and insular culture was the norm in central Wisconsin. It was certainly not an environment that would foster the kind of new thinking, creativity, and inclusion that was going to be needed to recreate a new economy. Why did we take this on? After much reflection, deliberation, and certainly dissension, our organization decided to step outside our traditional work of fund development and grant making and engage in the unknown territory of helping people shape a new future. At some level, we felt a moral imperative to act, that this was a clarion call, and what would it matter if we had amassed a great endowment if 25 years from now there was not a community to serve? We not only had a complex problem with no immediate solution, we were also in the midst of large-scale system breakdowns and significant shifts, including not only the economy, but also social structures such as leadership, engagement, networks of power and control, and workforce development systems. We had to act. A new vision was needed. However, before a new vision could be created, people needed to learn to see with new eyes. We needed to clarify what was important to us as a community, to inventory our assets, and articulate our shared values. Each of us living in Southwood County had self-interest, the interest of our children, our families, and our individual future, as well as common interest in the form of recreating a new economy. And it was at this intersection of self-interest and common interest that Incourage Community Foundation placed its big bet. And we bet on the people. We bet on the people who live in Southwood County. We bet on their ability to adapt to change, to not only adapt to change, but to thrive and grow and to lead change. Our hosts today at Rockefeller might call this resiliency. We talk about creating an adaptive community. This meant equipping people with new skills and language, not the technical training we were so comfortable with as a paper-making community. We focused on creating a shared vision of holding the community and each other in trust. We posed questions. What does it mean to be in relationship as residents of the same place? How could we practice and demonstrate civility in the midst of great change? What would it mean to have deliberate and respectful dialogue about the future that encouraged risk and tolerated failure. Ultimately, we were committed to helping residents find and recreate the threads that weave together community. We bet we'd be able to do this by changing hearts and minds. And we bet we'd be able to do this by engaging residents in creating a new vision of their future. And finally, we bet we'd be able to do this by adopting, modeling, and helping others understand the importance of equity, inclusion, and shared opportunity to guide future growth. This is not easy work. There were definitely risks and choices in this bet, and there still are. First, we mitigated one risk by choosing to do something. We understood that we were operating in a completely new and emerging future, one that is complex and ambiguous. We chose to understand by doing the same thing we'd always done, we'd get the same results, which clearly would be insufficient. The risk of doing this work in an environment of deep, palpable loss was very real. A Native American quote, "It's hard to see the future with tears in your eyes," really aptly reflected our community's emotional state. We saw fear and this sense of loss play out in several forms: misdirected anger, uncivil behavior, and turf wars. Instead of opening up to collaboration and new partnerships, many hunkered down and protected their piece of the shrinking pie. We risked our own capacity as an organization to do this work. We were, and still are, kind of feeling our way as we go for a decade and building the plane as we fly it, if you will. Our shared vision, participatory culture, and principles of equity and inclusion ran counterculture to the established norms. Everyone's role was changing, including the traditional power brokers and leaders in the community. Many of them had supported the Community Foundation. Some were on our board, and we did alienate some donors. And finally, the risk for us to be viewed as disingenuous. We were stating values of equity, inclusion, and shared opportunity. And what did that mean to our institutional culture, our policy, our practice, so that we could lead with authenticity? And what we learned that courageous leadership is essential across the community and vital, most significantly from board and staff. Like Helen Youngworth, our board chair and retired newspaper publisher, who is in the audience today, Helen's not afraid to challenge the status quo in our organization, in the practice of governance, and the field of philanthropy. I remember a decade ago being at a conference with Helen, and her commenting that she'd heard enough from people comparing using asset size as an indicator of their effectiveness, and asked if this field talked about what impact we were having, not what assets were under management. We learned individually that we needed to be the change we wish to see. In a small town, I am the foundation. We are the foundation, board and staff. In our personal networks, our social clubs, youth sports organizations, and the local grocery store. So that meant equipping board and staff with the self-confidence, skills, tools, language to be effective advocates for our work. And we live by the principle of reflective action and are not afraid to make course corrections as we go. This includes examining entrenched beliefs to surface barriers to growth and change. A quote from our friend Parker Palmer, "Authentic leadership will risk failure by making the space for others to act." And we've come to understand that we must be very mindful of another thing, and that's not promoting or supporting or perpetuating dependency. We don't want dependency to transfer from a paper company and founding family to Incourage Community Foundation or others that are taking leadership positions in the community. And this prompts a much deeper and ongoing examination of our institutional power and privilege as we work to create the kind of space and fertile environment for others to experiment, to take risks, and to fail. To source the wisdom of the community, to foster new networks and connections, and to surface individual passion has become the core of our work. We know from survey and research that residents want to engage. However, what we've learned is that it's not adequate to convene and bring people together and say everyone has a voice. When a participatory culture is not the norm, people need to be equipped with the skills, tools, information, and opportunities to build self-confidence and find their passion and take baby steps to participation. After a century of embedded norms that supported a hierarchy of leadership, hand-holding, love, and compassion are needed to foster changed behavior. So how do we know? How do we know that our big bet is paying off? We know by people in our community who are stepping up, choosing hope, embracing change, and modeling new behavior. Like Gus, pictured here, who for decades was principal of our largest high school, football coach, and I dare say pretty traditional in his leadership style years ago, command and control. Gus was part of the second cohort of residents trained in adaptive skills. He then became part of a Train the Trainer program to deliver adaptive training himself. And after retirement, we coaxed Gus into becoming Incourage's community coach. So he now speaks regularly, publicly, and passionately about trust, relationships, and love for each other and community. And people love and connect with this new Gus. So meet Christy Anderson. Christy deferred grad school here in DC to come home and organize her community around a resident-led development opportunity in the center of our downtown. Incourage purchased the historic former Gannett newspaper building, pictured behind Christy, and we're asking community members to determine its end use. This is the first highly visible example of resident-led and resident-centered processes to support deliberative decision-making and increase participation in civic life. Residents are looking at our assets, including our river, which had been a working river for a century, with new eyes. And meet our mayor, Zach Brewink, who's also here with me today as my guest. At 25, the youngest mayor elected in Wisconsin Rapids with a 2/3 majority vote. Of significance to know is that at age 18, Zach was named Ernst & Young Youth Entrepreneur for the nation. Atlantic named him one of the top 100 mayors to watch, and the White House recently named him one of the top 100 entrepreneurs in the United States under the age of 30. Zach was elected in our community on a platform of change and civic engagement. Kirk Willard is the award-winning plant manager and executive committee member for Ocean Spray Cranberries. He's also been instrumental in our community's success as the first rural site in the nation to participate in the National Fund for Workforce Solutions. 5 years of investment reimagining and changing the way that manufacturing workforce training is delivered in our region. Kirk and I have had the opportunity to speak together nationally about this change in the workforce system, most recently at MIT's Sloan School of Business. I love seeing perceptions shattered when Kirk talks convincingly and with data about raising the level of emotional intelligence of his workforce as a key driver of business success. He also champions the ability of like-minded businesses to raise the overall emotional intelligence of a community through training and human talent investments. And in closing, I share a favorite quote by Maya Angelou. You did then what you knew how to do, and when you knew better, you did better. I also used this quote to close a chapter that I wrote for the new book, which chronicles, and it's called Here for Good. It's about the second century for the field of community foundations, and they celebrate their centennial in 2014. We Incourage Community Foundation, we believe that community is the answer. The capacity of the community, of the human spirit, really to care, to be compassionate, and to connect are the driving forces of positive change. And after a decade of work, we believe we know better, and we will continue striving to do better. We also know there is always more to learn if we want to remain agile and adaptive. Thank you.